So, what are we going to do today? The context of this, and you would have seen when you signed up for the session, is helping you to build what I call a research analyst specifically for an LND team. Now, there's many ways that you can do this. You can choose a bunch of different AI tools. I am choosing to use NotebookLM today, or which is now called Gemini Notebooks for whatever reason. That transition happened after I'd actually published this session. So it's now called Gemini Notebooks instead of NotebookLM. The reason why I'm using NotebookLM to show you how to build your own research assistant is because it's really simple and it's pretty cheap. It costs about $5 a month to get the pro version. You can get a free version. If you're a Google Workspace user, it should already be part of that package that you have got. Like I say, you can replicate this in Claude, in ChatGPT, whatever AI tool is your poison of choice. But if you want to keep it simple, if you want all the features in one place, I highly recommend NotebookLM to do all of this. And I'll be showing you how that works in NotebookLM today. But like I say, this is all really transferable. So let's set the scene here in terms of how this can help you. I am an analyst, a researcher in the L&D world. So I spend a huge amount of time collecting loads of reports, loads of new innovations, looking at understanding things that are happening in the world of education and L&D. The problem I have is I have too much stuff. So I'm always trying to find a place to store it, to also get the best insights from those, distill them, and use them in the work that I'm doing. I also use this from a perspective of, and I'm sure some of you in L&D can attest to this as well, where I'm working with organizations where we're looking to enhance or bring up to date a lot of the working practices they already have in what they're doing, or maybe in some areas, some of the content that they're looking at. And what I can do is use a tool like this to go and actually see what are the more recent things that I should know, how can I apply them, and use some of the assets that I have previously. So the angle that I'm going to take today is basically looking at what I call, or this is part of what I call a digital brain. So I try and use AI as very much a contextual layer in the work that I do. I'm not using it to generate content or generate writer or any of that stuff. I'm very much using it as a place, for want of a better terminology, even if you were a Sherlock fans in the UK here, as a mind palace where I can go in, I can look at all of the reports, the research, my notes, anything that I gathered when I'm on the internet. I think all that looks interesting in one place, have the opportunity to converse with those sources to get out of that what I feel best fits for me, and then distill that to actually action that into the work that I'm doing. So if none of you have used NotebookLM before, this is what it looks like. I'm going to very quickly break down what this is, how it works, and what you need to know. So you have got a few components here. So one, on the left-hand side of your screen, you have got your sources. So sources is basically what it says on the tin. You can add up to, depending upon the plan that you've got. I think the free plan is up to 300 sources. So that can be anything from, and I'll show you here very quickly, you can add YouTube videos, websites, you can upload external files, connect it to Google Drive, you can copy and paste stuff from LinkedIn, other social media platforms, and drop it in on here. You can also use it to search for external research if you wish to do that. So in this notebook, what I've just created is a generic one. You could have this based on a topic, and based on that topic, you could just say to Google, hey, go off and either do a fast research, which like it says here, is just quick results, or go off and do an in-depth research. We can sometimes take up to 45 minutes to go and find the most relevant articles, reports, whatever assets they are for what you're trying to achieve. Again, you can refine those searches, so you can do that on the web, but you can also attach that to your Google Drive and other services as well. So it's really powerful to help fundamentally locate loads of the stuff that can be helpful for you and talk to it in one place. So you've got your sources. Chat is very self-explanatory. We've all used AI tools at this point. Chat is just the area where you go and chat to these sources, either all together, or you can choose, as you see on the left-hand side of your screen here, you can just untick the sources that you don't wish to talk to. So you can be really kind of laser focused on what particular source is going to help you on a task. And then Studio on the right-hand side here. So Studio, for want of a better terminology, it's basically where you can go and create new assets based off the conversations that you are having in Gemini Notebook. So examples being maybe you want to create a slide deck, maybe you want to create a podcast, maybe you want a video overview of all of the sources that you've got in this notebook. Maybe you just want a particular part of the notebook to be turned into a report, to be turned into a mind map. We'll explore some of those in a few moments' time. So you've got a nice menu here of things that you can do. But the thing to remember is it just works fundamentally, as I kind of described, as a bit of a digital brain. You give it the sources, which is basically its hard drive, then you're able to have conversations with those sources to contextualize the components that are on there. And then you're able to produce assets that could be helpful for you, either in your day-to-day work as an L&D operator, as a team, or as a consultant to actually power up some of the things that you are doing. So let's talk about how do we make this specifically for a research analyst. You can do loads of things with Gemini notebooks, but to actually make it specific as a research analyst, like most AI tools, we can give it custom instructions. So you don't have to do this, but I think actually this is the key ingredient to getting the most out of nearly every AI tool that I've ever worked with, but definitely with Gemini notebooks. So you will see up in the middle of our screen here over chat, we have got this kind of little icon here. We're going to click this icon and you can see it says configure notebook. Here we can basically say to Gemini notebooks, what is it we want to do? What do we want to achieve? What is happening here in this notebook itself? You've got some default options. They're okay. If you just kind of want to rock and roll with that, you can do that. But I would highly suggest you could do a couple things. You can click learning guide, which again can be hit and miss depending upon what you are trying to achieve in your context. But what I would say is select custom. And you can see here that you get over 10,000 characters to use to give custom instructions to NotebookLM to basically say what is going to happen in this notebook, what are the parameters, what are the guidelines, what are the things you expect it to give you, and how do you want that presented? So we're going to spend a little bit of time here because this is the kind of key component of what we go through today in how to structure this. Because a lot of people go onto AI tools and they just go, I'll give you a couple of lines and that's it. And just kind of expect the tool to figure that out. But actually what you will find here, I've got nearly kind of 2,000 characters sitting here on my custom instructions. And I'll take you through this kind of briefly after the session. There'll be an opportunity to download the resources from this session. So you'll get a template of these custom instructions that you can take and adapt for yourself. So what you can see here is I've basically said to Gemini Notebooks is that you're a research analyst, you're supporting the L&D team, you're going to read all of these sources that I have put in here. And then I've given it guidelines. So I said, look, below all of this is guidelines I want you to follow. And I said the user, i.e. me or whoever I share this notebook with, because you can share this notebook with others, they can collaborate on it as well. The user can provide additional guidelines and context to support these outputs. So the goal is to uncover the key insights that are most valued for the user based on their context. So the user will still need to give specific context on what they're trying to achieve and what they want that to look like. And I said here, if unsure of the user's context or you need additional information to provide clear findings, always ask the user to provide additional details. So if it ever gets stuck, if it ever gets lost, that is in there to do that. Is it always going to do that? Not always, but we hope it does that when the time comes. Now, what you'll see here is, and it's terrible because NotebookLM doesn't actually make this any bigger for me to show you, but I've laid out a few sections. So one, I've put an objective. I said every output must be understandable, it must be actionable, and it must be insight-led. So I've given it examples of what I want that to be. I've got a default answer structure. The reason why I do that is I find with a lot of the outputs that I get, a lot of the way these AI tools work is they share way too much stuff. So the problem is that we don't always need a war and peace novel in terms of an answer. So what I said is for my default answer structure, I want key takeaways. I want what the research says in a couple of bullets that map to my context. I want why it matters for L&D. I want actions to take. For a lot of the things, I actually want to think about, well, what can I do after I've actually seen this information? I've distilled it. What are the actions that I'm going to take there? And I have these style rules. Again, I've just said kind of plain English. I don't want any filler stuff because there's so much filler stuff with AI. I want bullets over having condensed paragraphs because it's not really helpful. Always cite the specific sources per claim and also make sure I can see that so I can go deeper should I need to, because I want to make sure that any claims are factually backed up from the sources that are in there. And then always be really clear on what you don't want. So I always say to these tools, what do I want you to avoid? So I've said here, literature review style intros. I don't need a gigantic Stanford University abstract on something. I want something that's really clear in a couple of sentences for me to grasp, for me to something to dig deeper into. I don't want it to be restarting the question before the answer. That is one of my pet peeves with AI. Is it always doing it? I don't need that. So we're just asking it to do that. And then again, I've kind of given it some pointers here that I'm hoping it takes on board when we go for our conversation. So make sure that we kind of have this framing perspective, blend in findings from multiple sources without saying which is what. I don't want that. I don't want it just kind of throwing stuff together. So the premise of this is what you need to do is spend a bit of time before you get started in thinking about how do you want to work with this tool? How do you want this tool to work with you? What is the main way you want the outputs to be structured? What is going to be most helpful? You can go back, of course, at any time and change this. So once you're happy with all of that, you just hit save and then you're good to rock and roll. So you've got your sources. I've got 4 sources here. Like I say, if you're on the free plan, you can get up to 300. If you're on paid plans like myself, you can get more. And we could do a bunch of stuff here. So first things first, I'm going to show you an example of something I have asked in my research. So you get an example of what it looks like from an output. But as I was saying before, you can go on here and you can basically just chat to your sources and ask any questions. If you don't want to chat to every single source, what you're able to, like I say, is you can untick them. So I can untick as many of these as I want to if I want to get really specific. The same goes for when I'm creating assets on the right-hand side of the screen here. To say I want to build a mind map, which I have built here, and I'll show you in a moment's time. Maybe I only want to have it on 2 of the sources instead of all 4 of the sources. So that's just a little trick to keep an eye out for. So in all of this research, what I've asked Gemini Notebooks is to basically look at frontier firms. So frontier firms, if people who don't know that, is a analogy that Microsoft coined, where it was basically talking about organizations that are at the front of being AI native or centralizing AI in their technology stack to use it across their organization. And I have a lot of that research in this notebook here. So what I've said here is that, okay, teach me how frontier firms are redesigning work models today. So what are some of the things that these reports and this research is telling me? So if we think about the structure that I've already built in the custom instructions, what you can see immediately is, and we'll collapse some of these to get a better view, is that you can see it says, okay, here's the key takeaway for you. The key takeaway is this. Here's what's going on. And you can see here, it's gone back to the sources. So I can go here and I can see, right, I could click on these and it will take me to that exact source. So my source guide, it will go on and say, this is where this exact output has been generated from. Very, very useful when we want to validate the stuff that AI is saying, because it is not always trustworthy, as I'm sure many of us know. So it's built the key takeaway and it's gone in the style that I asked it to. So it's gone, here's what the research says. And here's a couple of things that are going to be really useful for me to know based on that question, which is great. And again, you can see it's linking that all back to the sources that I have got here on the screen so I can investigate that. And it's said, why does it matter for LND? So it's gone to say, you know, based on my context in where I'm working, how is this going to be helpful for me? So on here, it's given me some examples here. And again, should I wish to, I can explore them further in the literature. And then actions to take this week. You might remember on the instructions, I said, look, I don't just want to talk about some of this stuff. I actually want to think about what are some of the things that I could take action on right now, or think about with my teams, or think about in my consultant business. And this is what you see here. So Gemini Notebook has gone, okay, here's a few things that you could work on if you wanted to. You could take away and you can go, okay, cool. Let's see what we can do here. You don't have to use these. If you don't want to, you can continue to have a conversation. You can say, hey, you know, these aren't exactly what I'm looking for. What are other things maybe we could consider? Because at the end of the day, this is a conversation. This is not a one and done, and then we leave, we don't get what we want. And you can see at the bottom of the screen here, Gemini Notebooks will also give suggestions to basically say, you know, what do you want me to do next? Or do you want me to do anything? A couple of things to note here as well. If you wanted to save this output here is that you can save that as a note. So we can click that and you can see on the right-hand side of your screen, that is now saved as a note. And you can go here in your studio and go, okay, cool, this is a note. So what we're able to do as well is convert that to a source, which is even better. So if you wanted to say, actually, I want to include this output in my source material going forward. So if you come back in 2027 or 2028 and you want to look at what did I talk about in 2026 here? What were some of the insights we distilled with the 4 sources that we had at the time versus the 40 sources maybe you have now in 2027 to 2028? Because this is another one of the great advantages here is that this is a living document. So I talk about a digital brain is you can keep coming back. You can keep looking at things you did this year, next year, however long you're coming back for. You can do comparative analysis. How has the research changed? What's going on in the workforce? So all of the stuff that we've got on here right now is from 2026. Imagine in 2030, you've got this body of research, this body of assets that you can come back to, you can keep building upon, you can keep learning more stuff, and you can compare that to the state of the world, whatever that looks like at that point today. So we could convert that to a resource, and you can now see here on the left-hand side of my screen, that becomes a resource there. So it's pretty straightforward. You can come here, you can set this up from custom instructions, you can have a conversation, you can ask what you want, you can go back down into these sources here, should you wish to. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, you can create all of these assets. I'm not going to show you all of these assets because they're pretty straightforward. There's a couple of things that I will show you that I've already created. So number one is a briefing document. So I just very quickly asked Gemini Notebooks to say, look at all the sources that I've got. Imagine that I need to be briefing my senior leadership team in a week's time. What are some of the kind of key things that I need to know out of these sources here? And you can see it's giving me kind of executive summary. It's giving me a bunch of things to look over. It's not too wordy, which is great, but that's something as a starter for 10 that I can go off, that I can review and I can use and say, okay, cool. Here's some interesting stuff that I can include. I don't have to use all of it. I am most certainly not going to send all of that to any senior individual in the organization. So never do that. Always making sure you are reviewing, using your judgment and editing, because a lot of this stuff can be word vomit most of the time. I've also created a mind map here. So I have become big on mind maps more recently. I was not the biggest fan, I should say, back in the day. But when I am using Gemini Notebooks, I find it really useful to use the mind map feature to actually interrogate the data more. So what that allows me to do is to get deeper into all of the key themes that sit within this research. So as an example, I could say, hey, let's look at critical skills and de-skilling that's happening in the organization today. What should I know about that? Again, if you're an N&D, these are loads of things that I've spoken about. If you stalk me on LinkedIn or you see what I do in my newsletter, probably things that you're talking about in your teams as well. So you can go in and you can find, all different things, and you can see on the side here that the chat has popped up because the chat is actually finding different things that are relative to this. So I could look at, okay, let's look at distributed de-skilling risk. And then what you'll see here is that in the chat, it's currently now going through and looking at, okay, so you want to talk about discussing critical skills and de-skilling. It gives me a response there. This is another way for me to do that. And of course, if you get to a point where you're like, hey, maybe, it's a couple of years later and I now want to look at a few more sources, what can I do here? So very simple thing. I discussed at the beginning, you can add your own sources if you wish to. If you're a nerd like me who is picking up stuff left, right, and center from organizations, from social media, from wherever pretty much, or the thousands of emails that come through with new research, you can upload all of that yourself. So again, copy and text, website, Drive, etc. If you want to get Gemini Notebooks to help you find research, if you haven't got any, you can do that. You just go here and you could just say, as a very basic example, let us look at skills for the workforce of the future that are currently impacted by AI. And we can say, okay, do a fast research instead of deep research. I said at the beginning, deep research takes a hell of a lot longer. So make sure to get yourself a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and go away for half hour and come back. And then we can do that. And then you can see there that Gemini Notebooks will go off. It will search for it. If you've used deep research before, or any research models of Gemini. You would have seen this previously. I have used it for comparative analysis with platforms with different types of research. And then you can see the research has gone off here. It's done it quite quickly. So I'm not saying it's going to be amazing. You've got the opportunity to review that. You can import the ones that you want. For the sake of the demo here, I am basically just going to go for these two here from Forbes, 6 critical skills, AI skills employers want to. Obviously, you can go here, you can review that should you wish to, and then I'll hit import, and then those are there. So if you want to not have to go out, keep harvesting information, keep searching for information on the particular topic, you can do that there. You can see because the Forbes one looks like it is paid content, it is unable to actually import that, which is cool. So that's very easy. Let's let us know. We can remove that source, and now that won't be part of our information going. So look, folks, that is pretty much it. Like I say, this is a lightning lesson. We do this in about half hour. So we've gone from the process of we have an idea of building the research analyst. We're using a very simple kind of ready-made tool for us in NotebookLM, where we don't have to attach in any connectors. We don't have to get involved in any MCPs if we don't wish to. Again, you can get a free version, you can get a paid for version should you wish to do that. And you've got the capability to use this as your digital brain and then add loads of stuff to it. Have many use cases that can go on from there. But this is just one example